everyone, and welcome back. It is finally time for me to reveal to you the full, historically accurate Aziraphale New Woman of the 1890s cosplay that I've been working on for quite a few weeks at this point in time. I know that I did a really thorough planning video talking about all of the different elements before I went through and showed most of the making of for those things, but just to refresh, the entire premise of this is the fact that Aziraphale from Good Omens as an angel has traveled through the entirety of time, and we have only seen a few different glimpses of what he looked like in different eras, and I thought it'd be really fun to try an era that we don't see, rather than trying to adapt what he does have in the series and make it more historically accurate, even though most of it is already pretty historically accurate. So I ended up going with the 1890s, more specifically looking at what they called the New Woman of the 1890s, which is to say that image we have of women on the bicycle from that era, women that are wearing suits and shorter skirts, and in that particular case are likely to be going to a women's club. And my premise of the story, my fan fiction, I guess you could say, was the fact that these women's clubs often had lovely restaurants in them, and Aziraphale really loves human food and going to different restaurants, and he would be dressing up as a new woman, because they go back and forth as to gender and appearance all the time, in order to be able to go into this restaurant without having to have an escort. This also, story-wise, works out really perfectly because the event that I was wearing this for took place in Chicago, and it was a two-part weekend event where there was a ball on Saturday evening, which I wore a remade version of my 1899 formal gown, which there should be a video about that in the near future. But then the next day, there was also going to be a less formal tea, and this creates the perfect situation. So my Aziraphale cosplay got to go to tea with a bunch of lovely people and have a wonderful meal, and we also got to explore the rest of the hotel which we were staying at. It's called the Drake, and it's full of these really large and elaborate spaces in back that were very old ballrooms. So it had some beautiful areas that were empty of people, so we wandered through and did photographs and kind of messed around back there for a little while. So the entirety of that event was much more laid back, but absolutely lovely. This was all through the Chicago Historical Society, who is starting to do some of these larger events, so hopefully they'll continue to do more in the future, because we all had a wonderful time there. Highly recommend it. Not gonna lie, it was nice to do a 1-week trip rather than a 1-month trip like the last one that I did. This was much easier. I only needed 2 outfits for this entire weekend. So much simpler to deal with, and inevitably 1 week away from home is much easier than a month away from home, so I come back to my dog and to my bed, which notably the sponsor for this week's video is Birch Mattress. If you've ever experienced a bad night or week of sleep because of a hotel mattress, you know how quickly everything unravels. And it's even more important at home. That's why I am so happy to introduce Birch. They make mattresses and sleep products that are stylish, comfortable, and environmentally conscious. Not only do they offer the simplicity of having a premium mattress delivered to your door, but they understand the importance of materials. Their Memorial Day sale starts May 15th, where they will be offering 25% off, so don't forget to mark your calendars for that. Their non-toxic mattresses come from a factory in Arizona and are crafted with organic and natural materials that have been sustainably sourced. The Birch Luxe Natural Mattress even includes 8 different layers of organic cashmere, New Zealand wool, fair trade cotton, and 100% natural latex. And by having wool in these mattresses, it makes them both allergen and mildew resistant. An absolutely essential feature for me, especially as spring arrives in full force. I've been sleeping on my Birch Luxe mattress for over a year now, and it makes such a difference. I really thought my old mattress was doing as much as I could for my back and joint pain, but boy was I wrong. No more aches and pains when I get up in the morning, and I'm not waking up all night long trying to find a comfortable position. It's hard to know just how important a good night of sleep is until you experience it. Turns out I'm a morning person, and you don't have to worry about trying it out. With your Birch mattress, you get a 100-night sleep trial along with a 25-year warranty. That means you'll get more than 3 months to make sure that you love it. The mattress arrives at your door, rolled up in a box with free shipping in the US, and it was so simple to set up. I love my Birch mattress, and I think you will too. If you're looking for a new bed, check out Birch. As I mentioned, the Memorial Day sale starts May 15th, though you can always go to birchliving.com/Nicole Rudolph below for 20% off. Thanks again to Birch Mattress for sponsoring this week's video and giving me a great night's sleep over and over again. The entirety of this project was rather large. I had a very long list. I did a thorough video talking about all of the planning, some of the patterning, and finding the resources and the research for all of this, finding the fabrics, which ended up being honestly the hardest part out of all of the entire project. The building, each piece took me about a week. I did run into some problems throughout the process though. So I thought for this video I could talk about some of the experiences that I had and some of the things that I learned and some of the things that went well or not. And then I can actually show you the entire ensemble and you can see a lovely little bit of the event as well. So first off, I started with the knickerbockers. Those were very simple. I already had the fabric in question. Everything went really quickly on those, except for fitting the back end, which I talked about in that video. There was a lot of effort to get the butt to not be a saggy butt. So a fair amount of time and effort was put into that. Unfortunately, that meant that it took a little bit over a week rather than the 1 week I had allotted. Thankfully though, the divided skirt did go very quickly. That didn't have nearly as many problems aside from trying to figure out how to cut it out of a lot less fabric than I probably should have and piece a little bit, but it's not noticeable. It turned out really well. The fit of it is great. The construction of the weird waistband, everything worked out well, but that is sort of where the easy part left off. Those two garments went pretty quickly, and then I moved into the waistcoat where the velvet started fighting me. And I've had a lot of people recommend you need to get a velvet pressing board. I totally understand that they are somewhat expensive and I don't really use velvet all that much. So for me, most of the time, doing the technique of putting velvet to velvet face together, which allows you to iron things, works very well. This stuff was just particularly temperamental when it came to the iron, but that's why I did hand stitching, so that way I could sort of hold everything into place, folded edge. But it still came out in about a week, so it's still on schedule. Then I moved on to the coat, and that's where things started to kind of fall apart for me. The problem I had with the coat was the fact that I mentioned in the video I had not yet found a lining fabric. I had originally considered possibly doing it as a unlined, but I ended up backtracking on that and deciding maybe lining is better, especially for the sleeves, gives the right amount of puff and fullness. And I started looking for lining fabrics. Ideally, most of the linings that I see from this era, some are taffeta silk, but a lot of them are a silk satin. And quite a few of those actually have a cotton backing to them. So what I usually end up doing is looking for either a silk or a rayon satin, because the rayon is actually very effective. It looks the same, but it is much cheaper. So I will end up going with that anytime that I can. And there are usually quite a few options out there. I ended up going to Mood. They had a few different choices. I went with one and ordered enough, and then 3 days later I got an email letting me know that turns out they were actually out of that fabric. It was listed improperly online, so I got that order canceled, and then I had to order something else. So that ended up taking more time than I had allowed for, because as I was like, oh, it's fine, I'll just go ahead and start the jacket, and I don't need a lining until the end, right? It's the lining. Then I started the process and realized the first step was making pockets, and therefore pocket flaps. And what do you do with the pocket flaps? You line them with the lining fabric. So that's supposed to be the first step of the process, which meant that either I was going to have to wait and not do anything on this jacket, or I could find another fabric. I looked in my stash and I have plenty of little bits left over from lining similar things, so I could have gone with a similar lining, but I thought it'd be a little weird if it was just off in tone a little bit. So I decided perhaps something more contrasting would be appropriate, and that's how I ended up with the stripe that I used. It was a fabric that I had left over from a previous project, and it fits in color-wise, and though Aziraphale doesn't actually have any stripes in his outfit, he works more with plaids, tartans, that sort of thing. But it seemed like it matched, so I went with that because it felt like it'd be intentional rather than accidental. I did try to hold off a little bit before working on the jacket by working on some other things. I had started the shoes as of that point, or rather started the lasts as of that point, because I knew there was a likelihood that that was going to take me quite a few days to get through, but the jacket kind of got delayed, so I went ahead and worked on the shirt, which I wasn't sure that I was going to bother doing because I had like okay options as replacements. Thankfully, the shirt only took me a couple of days. That ended up being out of the lighter weight, more flowy fabric option that I had rather than the stiffer shirting cotton, because I wanted to do a fair bit of gathering around the neckline and around the sleeves and a few other places, and I thought that that would be a little more conducive without feeling puffy. I know the sleeves are supposed to be puffy, but I didn't want the entire thing to be puffy. And it went fairly quickly. I did decide on doing a separate collar, a button-on style for that, because I'm not a big fan of really high collars all of the time. I can wear it for costumes, I'm perfectly fine with that. There are some days I'm okay with it. Some days, no, I do not want a high collar, and I didn't want to limit the shirt into only being that, so I did the very low standing collar that you usually do to button on the higher collar, which was out of a contrasting white linen, but then I can take that off if I really want to. Very easy. The only problems that I encounter with that shirt is the fact that because it is a lighter weight fabric and I wanted a little bit of loft to the sleeves, I ended up putting a little bit of tarlatan into the shoulder areas that got gathered up with the sleeves, so that way there was a bit of poof to the entire thing. Nothing too extreme, just a little bit. So other than that, the shirt was very simple, basic pattern that I came up with. Nothing too interesting about it. So I'm not going to do an entire separate video on that piece. But once the shirt was done and I was working on the jacket fully and the lining had come in, I also was starting to work on the boots. I only had about a week and a half left until I had to leave at that point, as I was finishing up the jacket and getting ready to really start in on the boots. Got pretty far into the process, realized somewhere around the end of making the uppers before I started the assembly that I did not have eyelets in my house, or at least not enough. I had a few of the color that I needed, but I just didn't have that many. And so had a small panic over that and decided to go to one of my local fabric stores, which is called Mill End because it specifically has a whole bunch of end cuts. So what you find there is very random. It just depends on whatever they got from stores clearing out old inventory. They always have basics, things like thread or eyelets. And I actually had a miracle of my own when it came to going to Mill End to get the eyelets for the boots. In addition to all of the stuff that I had made, I also needed a cravat. And I had mentioned in the planning video that I was having a hard time finding a good fabric for this. I kept looking. I wasn't finding anything that was the right weight of silk, that was the right size of plaid, the right tones, or anything even close to most of these options. Everything was large scale, meant for, you know, your entire sofa or something. It was not working out very well. And so I had given up on that and actually went through and digitized on my own a really detailed version of the woven plaid that he has in his 1860s cravat. Spent a good few hours working on that one evening. Sent that off to be custom printed by a place over in the UK because they do custom printing on silk, which is not something that Spoonflower or a lot of the other brands do. But there ended up being a problem. They printed very quickly. They sent it out very quickly. They sent it out expedited. FedEx, wonderful. It'll get here super fast. It usually takes no time at all. The problem is apparently Memphis is a black hole for FedEx, and it was lost. So it has been reprinted and they mailed it out again, and guess what happened? It's still lost in Memphis now. So I'm not sure that that's ever going to show up. Maybe someday I'll be able to actually have the custom printed fabric that is exactly what I was looking for this in a silk twill, but it was not going to happen in time. And so I figured I was just going to be using that aqua stripe that I used for the pocket flaps as my absolute never mind, this works, it's a cravat, call it good. But when I was at Mill End, I just happened to glance over at the relatively small assortment of silks that they have, which you have no way of knowing what's going to be there. And there was a plaid. It was a silk dupioni, so it's not exactly what I'm looking for, but it's decent weight. It's the right colors. It's not super large print. Good enough. So I got a small amount of that and shoved it into my to-go sewing bag because I did not have time to make a cravat while I was here at home. Instead, what I did was I just cut a diagonal rectangle out, seamed it in the middle, and then ironed pleats into it so it was narrower in the back. I haven't finished any of the edges because it's cut on the bias. The edges aren't going to fray, aside from the ones that are shoved down into the waistcoat, so it's good enough. That was my general attitude on the whole thing. It is good enough, and hopefully someday I'll actually be able to get a hold of the fabric that I had custom printed twice. But that got me through nearly everything I needed. The very last few things were the wig and the hat. The wig I ended up styling at the hotel the day of because I didn't have time prior to that. And then the last thing was the hat, which that I did get a modern version, but I still needed to make it smaller because it was just way too big. It felt almost a little comical even on top of the wig. So I ended up taking all of the ribbons off and steaming it over the brim shape that I have from the top hat for Gonzo. So that way I could sort of pull it up and over and actually shortened the crown by about ½ an inch or more and pulled it up and over this new brim shape, which was more the historical brim shape that I was looking for. It worked pretty well. However, it was a little off because no matter what I seemed to do to keep that little crease in place and centered up, it seemed to twist one way or the other. And so I think it's off slightly. It's okay. It's fine. Problem was that was only a couple days before I left, so I let it cool and solidify for what I thought was long enough, but not really. Put it into the luggage, packed carefully around it as best as I could, but by the time we got there, it had kind of like shapen in a different way and the brim was really weird. And I was like, okay, I can just steam it. I can just steam it with the iron in the hotel room. It'll be fine, but I still needed to retrim it. I needed to put ribbon binding around the edges and I needed a ribbon hat band. And I ran out of time. The hat was honestly the least important thing. It was either do the wig, do the cravat, or do the hat. And the hat, I'm gonna be inside the whole time. I'm not going outside wandering about. It's fine. Now it's done. I took the time to finish it, so you do get to see it today, but I didn't wear it for the event because at that point it just didn't look very good and it was nowhere near finished. I do have a couple of extra special bits that I added to the outfit that are specific to Aziraphale. He does have a few noticeable things that he carries through. One of which is his ring. That is something that you can get 3D printed today. There are also other people that sell different versions of it, so I ended up getting from Shapeways the ring printed, as well as his cufflinks. Because I made the shirt in a way that accepted cufflinks, I went ahead and ordered those, or rather, I really messed up and forgot about the fact that I'm ordering from a 3D printing site and not a place that sells things like cufflinks. So when you order one, you're ordering one, not a pair. It's in there, it's written in there. I just didn't read apparently and was really stupefied when I opened up the package 2 days before I was getting ready to leave and there was one cufflink and I just went, I'm an idiot. So I have since ordered the other cufflink. It has arrived, so that will be part of the ensemble for this video. But I didn't get to wear them for the event. It's fine. This is a work in progress. As with all cosplays, you keep adding things to it. You keep changing and updating and upgrading. So hopefully every single time that I wear this, it will get to be a little bit more. And hopefully sometime in the next year or so, I will have a reason to wear it all together at some point again. But as for today, I have an excuse to put it on to show all of you. So here is my final finished, as of right now, completed version of my new woman Aziraphale.